All right, sit down for this one, because I'm about to say something controversial. And, oh god, no, not that. Keychron is not the best keyboard. Now, for some of you, this is obvious, but for a lot of people, they Google best custom keyboard and Keychron pops up. And while Keychron is a fantastic, good enough keyboard, what if you wanted something that was just a little bit better? But wait, Hipyo, that means I'm gonna have to build a keyboard myself, and I'm gonna have to pick out switches, and I'm gonna get overwhelmed, and no. Howdy hey, I'm Hipyo Tech, and I try keyboards so you don't have to. So in this video, I'm gonna be trying a pre-built keyboard that's supposedly better than a Keychron, the Keychron Max series. And I'm gonna be putting it to the test so that you can see that maybe you wanna do a little bit more research. And I know what you're thinking, there's no way a keyboard that you buy will be as good as a keyboard that you build. And while you are sacrificing a few things, which are important, and I'll talk about those later, you're still getting something that sounds like, dare I say, heaven? Now, in this video, I'll be looking at the Sword 68. This is a keyboard from my sponsor, Varmilo, and whenever I work with a keyboard brand, they cannot review my video, they cannot tell me what to say, and all of my thoughts are my own. However, they have given me a link that I'll put down in the description. This keyboard is interesting in a few different ways, and not the unboxing kind of way, because there's just a braided cable, some spare keycaps, and 2.4 gigahertz dongle. Now, at first, Varmilo asked me to review this keyboard. And they sent me it, and I said, no, your keyboard is ugly. The reason being is that they sent me the blue Arial version. However, this is the lilac. Also, just between you and me, we're not going to talk about the Arial version. It's horrifically ugly, Varmilo. I have no idea why you released that. I mean, you see why all my thoughts are my own? I'm sorry, guys. Now, you're probably wondering what makes this keyboard unique and what makes it special, Hipyo. It just looks like an average 65% keyboard made out of aluminum. Well, the first thing is the price, because this comes in at $219 US. Now, a few years ago, that would actually be a fair price for a bare bones keyboard. However, we're in 2024, and usually you can get a pre-built keyboard for half the price. So what makes this thing unique? Now, I will come out and say, this is not a budget keyboard. So if you're on a budget, this really isn't for you, and there are alternatives that will give you more value. However, there are some things that they've done here that make it feel a little bit higher quality. Not the sticker though. The first of which being this nice aluminum weight on the back. It's engraved, but you just can't see it because of my lighting conditions. Like, you can almost see it here if you squint, but it looks really nice. The second is something that you have to hear. You hear how it doesn't sound like a blacksmith's anvil? Well, it actually seems like they're using a much more solid aluminum for this build, and overall, the build quality and the finish feels remarkably premium. Like, this feels closer to my Sangeo 65 than it does to my Womier 71. Which actually raises a pretty interesting question, because they've priced this thing eerily close to the Keychron Q2 Max. So later in this video, I'll be putting that to the test because there's no way it's better, right? Keychron is the best keyboard, right? Now, definitely the one place where I feel like they cut corners was with the keycaps. These are double shot keycaps and they are of relatively decent quality, but you still get the shift at space T, and they're by no means perfect quality ABS keycaps. The dual tone case, absolutely gorgeous, I love it. And these switches are a sight to behold. I've been getting kind of bored of Kale switches, like they honestly haven't wowed me, but these Kale Prestige voice switches are definitely a step in the right direction because the factory lubing feels absolutely great. Now, the first con is that this board only comes with linear switches. So if you're tactile or clicky gang, then this board just isn't for you because they don't sell a bare bones version of it. And I really wish they did. I asked them to, and they said no. And here's the biggest con of the whole entire board. It supports 2.4 gigahertz wireless. However, you have to remove the caps lock to turn it on and off, kind of similar to the Rainy 75. This is just woefully impractical if you're someone that turns your keyboard on and off frequently or uses it in different modes throughout the day, so that's a huge L for your productivity. However, this did inspire me to pull out my desk mat, which is my Pixel Comet desk mat, linked down below. And look at how beautifully this thing matches it. Like, this is genuinely a gorgeous keyboard build, and you didn't even have to pick out the parts yourself, which is a pro or a con. But how is it as an actual keyboard? Because that's important, right? Well, the gasket performance is lackluster at best, and I'm gonna investigate why that is later, because this should have pretty decent gasket performance. And like, there's a little bit of flex, and it feels relatively nice to type on, but you're not getting like pillow gaskets or anything like that. However, what I will say is the switches do feel buttery smooth, and it does sound really nice. Which actually brings me to talking about some of its competition, because if you're on a hyper budget, as I mentioned before, you can get something like the Womier SK71. However, if you're on a similar budget, then you might just be inclined to get the Keychron Q2 because you want a pre-built keyboard and you don't want to wait the time of a group buy. Now, the Q2 Max, which is the wireless version, is $10 cheaper than this board. However, what I noticed immediately is the anviliness. Like, the build quality on this Varmilo is shockingly better. However, one place where Keychron does win is the software, because it supports QMK and VIA, whereas Varmilo supports Varmilo, which is definitely not the greatest software in the world. It sucks. However, a side-by-side comparison also reveals that this sounds and feels better than the Keychron. I mean, the Keychron will sound and feel great once you mod it, but this is completely stock. Now, I haven't actually made a dedicated video on the Keychron Max series or really any of their newer ones, just because I'm kind of unimpressed. Like, Keychron's quality really peaks with the Q series, and then once you get past that, it's all kind of the same board, but for a more expensive price. But a lot of people still buy it because it's really, really safe. But don't take my word for it. Let me give you a sound test of both keyboards side by side. Now, both of those keyboards were entirely stock right out of the box, so if you're incredibly lazy and you don't want to do anything in your keyboard journey other than buy a keyboard and feel like you got something nice, then the Varmilo actually wins that award. However, what if you did want to do something nice? In fact, this keyboard is a little bit loud, so I do want to take it apart and see what's going on with it. However, you might have noticed that there's no screws anywhere. So let me just real quick take some keycaps off, and they're going with the visibly screwless design. This is aesthetically really nice, but it is a little bit annoying if you're someone that wants to mod your keyboard quite a lot. Now, with all of the keycaps off, this got me thinking, and some of you might know that I worked with Varmilo in the past to cover their silent keyboard, the Varmilo Bluebell. So that made me think, what if I make this keyboard silent? And that could actually be very fun. With more people returning to the office, I feel like more people are wanting silent keyboards. So I'm gonna take all these switches out and I'm gonna put in something a little bit more silent. I also want to take the keyboard open to see if there's anything I could possibly do to mod the case to make it even more quiet. Because at some point, I feel like if you get this keyboard, you're gonna wanna mod it, right? Like, you get a custom keyboard, you mod a custom keyboard. You subscribe to Hipyo Tech, you subscribe to Hipyo Tech, you know? I was also wondering how the wireless is decent on this board, and with that little antenna, they actually give you a decent connection. So make sure you plug it back in. There's also quite a lot of foams here and a very interesting gasket design with a little flippy bit that connects it on the bottom. Now, originally, I was gonna fill this whole entire board with kill mat, and don't worry if your name is Matt, because I actually decided to just go with the foam that was pre-installed in the case. The reason being is they actually did all of their homework here. Like, there's not a single thing about this board's actual construction and foam design that I would personally change. Like, their software is legitimately terrible, but their actual build, pretty good. So then I tried a bunch of different switches to find the one that was the most silent, and I went ahead and installed them in the keyboard. In this case, I went with WS silent switches, which I will have linked down below. They're a fantastic silent switch choice. Definitely not the best, but very solid. I feel like the best silent switch would be something electrocapacitive. I'm a huge electrocapacitive simp, but none of you like videos on those keyboards, so yeah, I can't make any of them. I then tried some variations with and without foam to see what I liked, and I definitely liked all foam, because we're going for a silent build here, and foam dampens things. Now, remember how I mentioned you need to plug the antenna back in? Well, originally I forgot, and my wireless performance was terrible, and I was like, what's going on? So then I took it back apart, I plugged it back in, and it was perfectly good. Yay. Now, the stock stabilizers were plate mounted, which I feel like they definitely cheaped out on. They could have gone with screw-in stabilizers, so I did have to tune them up with a little bit of lube, but after that, they were perfectly fine. Also, for some reason, the spacebar really didn't like my silent switch, so I just stuffed it with a little bit of kill mat and it ended up absolutely perfect. Like it was making just a little bit too much noise. With those quick 30-second adjustments done, the board was finally built and I had a silent sleeper agent. Now, I just wanted to kind of show you this to show you that, yeah, even if you buy a pre-built keyboard, you can quickly swap the keycaps and switches and get a really good typing experience and maybe customize the sound. Maybe you had to go back into Office and you had to make your keyboard quiet. Well, it was that easy. Now, this keyboard isn't perfect by any means, but I think it is another really solid choice for that like $200 price point. Ignoring the software, it's a decent quality above the Keychron, and it also punches at the same weight as the Neo at the same price as buying keycaps and switches and the Neo, without having to wait for a group buy. Same for like the Zoom 65 and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely interesting and definitely worth looking into to see if it might fit your personal preferences. Speaking of preferences, I'd prefer if you watched this whole sound test to support my YouTube algorithm overlords. Bye.